but there is like the narrative, the very simplistic narrative was punctured, but in the kind of like grand arc of time, like surely he can create a narrative around like their long-term BTC absolute holdings continue to go up. They sometimes sell, but like overall they grow in the long term, which is what he seems to be trying to go for. I'm just saying, like, it's not crazy that he convinces the market of that, right? You just need to demonstrate it over a few data points.
That's the thing. It's not crazy, but narratives have Lindy as well. And he just took the old narrative and threw it into the trash. And now he has to rebuild this one. And for properly rebuilding this one, he's going to likely need a bull, because otherwise everybody's gonna say like, "Oh, nice, you sold it and you bought it like 2% lower." Big whoop.
Hello, everyone. We're back. How long has it been?
Way too long. I think a couple months. It hasn't been less than a month.
Yeah. Mika is in an undisclosed location in Finland for a change. Is this a safety thing, or are the kidnappers coming for you?
No, I'm hidden well.
All right. There was a lot of stuff that happened. There's probably a few things that we would have wanted to discuss in real time, but we weren't able to manage it. But I think it's actually maybe we can start with Zcash, because now there's like a full post-mortem almost to be had.
Is there?
I mean, there's never a full post-mortem, but I think there is, like, we can look at the events and draw some conclusions. And I'm actually not 100% sure on the exact status. Maybe one of you will know. But so contextually, Zcash, a Zcash hired contractor or employee or whatever the company was that behind it, was it Shielded Labs? I think. I don't remember. But anyway, someone who's basically being paid to do security work for Zcash found a critical bug that would have allowed sort of someone to just mint money in the shielded pool. And then there was a big ruckus. Zcash was on kind of like a all-time run at the same time. So it was very unfortunate timing, but obviously good that it was caught. And it was caught by essentially a white hat and not a black hat. They then created this mechanism where the tokens would move to a new shielded pool through this turnstile thing that would allow everyone to verify the exact amount of the tokens. One thing here to mention is that it was basically like a race against time. So because both pools were a certain amount. So if someone had created new tokens in this previous pool, that pool's amount would be larger, and only this the supposed to be amount could move to the new pool. But there's no way of knowing who it is, right? And so the first people that got their tokens out essentially got them out. People were quite confident that it hasn't been exploited, but I don't actually know if we yet have a firm, like if we have concrete information on whether it had been exploited. So if it had not been exploited, this would have essentially been perfect. Like we would have verified the amount, and then it would be secure and so on. But do either of you know if that has like resolved to some extent?
No, I don't have about as much information as I do. It's perhaps important for people who haven't looked into the peculiarities of Zcash's implementation that Zcash has actual privacy on their chain. This is not just like some coin mixer or something. So the tricky issue with this, and one of the things that caused a really negative impression, well, first of all, this bug has been there for 4 years, since May of 2022. And there is effectively no way to know if it was exploited during that time. right? And on top of that, this was found by a researcher using Opus 4.0, not even Mythos, right? Who knows what the hell is going to start coming up once companies do have access to Mythos to throw at this. So as you described it, that is accurate in theory. In theory, if there were currently no extra fakely generated tokens in the pool, then everybody got their stuff out safely. But there's basically no way to know if this had been exploited before or not. Like it is literally impossible to do a proper post-mortem on this.
Zcash actually got access with us now and did an audit.
Yeah. Anthropic audited it, as I understand.
Yeah, that's correct.
But so one dynamic that I just found really interesting, which I kind of alluded to, was that if you were the exploiter, if you had exploited it, you would probably be pretty on top of this migration. And so there's a very high likelihood that you would get out with your coins. And so then some innocent person would be essentially left holding a bags. Their coins would just be essentially destroyed. But so we'll see what happens with that. One thing I do want to say is, like, I think Zcash has recovered markedly well. My initial analysis was basically that this kills the timeline for Zcash to become a Bitcoin, private Bitcoin. And now I'm not so sure anymore. I do think it hurt the momentum, but I'm not so sure. I think like the remaining concern is more like a general complexity concern, whereas like, is it possible for us to be sure? And you can argue that Bitcoin has had issues along the way and all that stuff as well. So it's like, it doesn't necessarily kill it, but it certainly, there is a way in which, like, if something was exploited, then that's just on people's minds. And even though it doesn't really make sense, people prefer to use things that haven't been exploited in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a big chance there that even if it does end up becoming a private Bitcoin of sorts, it becomes more of a private Bitcoin as a payment method, not a private Bitcoin as a private store of value, because you don't know. I mean, when Teemu said that it recovered remarkably well, it basically went from like low 700s to mid 200s. So this was a massive fucking drop in about a week and a half or something on value. And yes, it almost doubled from there. So it's kind of like in the middle of between both points. But still, if you were considering about holding your value in Zcash, this kind of swings would likely give you pause unless privacy is by far your main concern.
Yeah, and this the other sort of cultural aspect around this is this was probably by far the most shilled thing. This was almost like a consensus crypto industry bet. You know, it was shilled by people from the Solana ecosystem, from the Ethereum ecosystem, even like some Bitcoiners. And that's quite rare. And then it kind of fell on its face, which is a shame. But Mika, what do you think? Did you think Zcash before had an opportunity to get to private BTC status?
Yes.
And do you think they still do?
Yeah, and essentially no change, I would say, in that. Because for the private Bitcoin and Bitcoin competitor, the leadiness is kind of probably the most important thing, and Zcash probably in some way at least has that the most. These acts obviously aren't good, but yeah, I think like kind of what you said about the technical complexity, I think that's the surface that bothers people, not or is like the challenge. You could even make like an argument where it makes sense for it to take years for Zcash to take off because the technical complexity is larger. So you kind of want more time and I don't think this actually kind of in the big picture really influences that at all. So like and Bitcoin has like, then another way to look at it is also I think Bitcoin has a couple of weaknesses here. which are kind of real. One of which is Saylor. I think Saylor is a huge weakness on liability for BTC. And then also just like the general upgrade path slash figuring out things towards quantum or even just like transfers in some sense. So
Yeah. Yeah, we will come to Saylor, but I think so. Like my phrasing of it is, I think Lindy is important, but I think it's post-hack Lindy. And granted, this wasn't a hack, and it was handled very well. Props to the Zcash community. I think they did. Like, it could not have been handled any better. I thought it was extremely well handled. But there is still some aspect where, like, it's like how you know, every time there's an exploit, you reset some Lindy clock. Maybe it's not the full Lindy, but there's something that resets, and that at least slows things down. Like anyone who was deploying actively into Zcash, I'm sure paused deployment. And have they, started deploying again?
That puts those into an interesting position because you can be like skittish about deploying after something like that happens, but really the thing you should have done is deploy, at that moment. And then, which means that, okay, if you're going to take the trade, like what's going to happen? Do you feel like, oh, there's uncertainty, which means that I'll get a better price here? But if there's uncertainty, is my thesis even playing out? And then the opposite direction is that if it starts running, do I chase? And I almost like would, like this is one of those cases, like in crypto, it's so interesting, and in crypto cycles, which is like, how much do you chase the fastest runners of like a particular cycle or something, or, like in a sense that something's going up, it's like, it takes a lot of skill because every pump has kind of been sold in a way for a long time. So then knowing when the situation is where you're actually chasing, it's okay to chase the pump, and you should chase it very aggressively, is very interesting. And I actually think Zcash is one of these situations. And I think, like, for example, Hyperliquid has been one of these situations as well. So I think it looks to me more like that kind of play, and I would actually chase it more than I would like be afraid and start a long dollar cost average in a sense if it goes up.
Yeah, I kind of I understand. And like I think there's like one of the strongest arguments for Zcash is that if there's product market fit there, which I don't think is 100% clear, but there's an indication of that it might be. If there's product market fit there, there's no other contenders right now, and that's quite unique. Even Hyperliquid, I would argue, has many more. Like, there's much more nipping at that sort of.
And there's a much more attractive trade, which is that Hyperliquid already trades at like 70 billion or something, and you have to get there via discounted cash flows, which stuff, and which is not unreasonable. It's not like it's not the dumbest, it's not valued like Ethereum. Like, it's not the dumbest thing you've ever seen in your life. But Zcash is 7.8 mil right now, and you start looking at the BTC valuation relative to that, and you start to be like, hey, Saylor weakness, quantum negative narrative, privacy actually mattering, people who are in BTC, who are in ETH, who are in Sol, kind of accepting, all being more positive on this than they would on anything. BTC market cap 1.28 trillion, so that's up 140, 160 times, 170 times. So you start to get like a pretty interesting, like, especially when things turn around and things look good, you start getting that comparison, and then you start being like, hey, I can be 20% of the market cap. And this is one of those in a long time, like, where a real relative valuation kick could make this like really go a lot higher.
Yeah, and there's in general, there's not a lot of projects that have even the positioning or the direction to compete for this like asset status. And in some ways, BTC has shown that there is demand for that. And like it, like there's not, it's really hard to get there. It's almost like you can't force it. If you happen to stumble on it, it's like very, very valuable. But I am a little bit hesitant because I do think this affects other sort of ZK things as well. Like the complexity is concerning. Like we had this exploit, but like Zcash also has kind of like as in some ways a ZK weakness, which is that anything that's negative about ZK will negatively affect the narrative around Zcash. And so if you have exploits in completely unrelated ZK things, like those all kind of affect Zcash. They all paint a picture of the reliability of the technology. And I think the average, like if you want to get to that asset status, you need to hit like a pretty average investor in a way, like both in retail and in financial institutions. It needs to be like, it's like super kind of mid curve in a way. And it just needs to be simple. Like you just need to either not be exposed to any of the risks, or they need to seem like, I don't know, they just are far outweighed by all these other positives. And I think there's risk in that trade. Like, but the overall narrative that at some point there is going to be something like BTC which has privacy, I do believe in that, but I think timing it with a specific thing is a bit difficult.
I don't know. Look, there's the issue with this is that I suspect that we are both in conversation and in people's heads as they listen to this. We might be conflating a few concepts. I do think that Zcash, when it comes to like private assets, is the main chance out there, even if I have by and large in the last few years given up on them ever figuring out their development ecosystem story, right? Sadly, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but I have suspected for a while that privacy is going to end up being a ghetto. And the fact that Zcash is so private that you couldn't even have known if this was being exploited or not is something that makes it a lot more likely to end up being regulated or cut off at the exchange point, basically. So yeah, you're not going to end up in prison for holding a Zcash wallet or something probably, but are you going to be able to trade this and turn it back into money that ends up on your bank account in the, I don't know, next 2 to 5 years? Unclear. And the other thing is that precisely that lack of verifiability and the fact that nobody could have known if this, it just was no way to know if this had been exploited, means that it's something that might be appealing precisely for the kind of retail investor / larger scale crypto trader group. But I have my doubts about this making the leap into mainstream non-crypto companies putting money into it the way that it happened with Bitcoin. The complexity and the risks seem to be, I don't know, relatively large. But then again, I would never have thought that we're going to see public companies putting money into Bitcoin at the time that we did. So maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe here's one way to think about it. What year did BTC have a market cap of 8 bill? And start to like think about what was the level of felt risk, what was the narrative like in terms of institutional adoption, who were the groups who kind of were there. I can't even tell you when BTC was 8 bill. I have to like think. I have to actually check the like.
It's 2018. 2018 peak was the first time it went over 8 bill. It went to like 18 or something, and then it came down.
Okay, so 8 billion. Okay.
Consistently above 8 billion. It went around 2020.
Yeah. Okay.
Or no, 2019.
Yeah. Okay. So like Zcash, BTC 2019 adoption rate on average like 2x slower, I suppose, based on like kind of years in the market relative to price action. So if that trend continues, I don't know if this is a perfect analogy, but I think you understand what I'm going to.
No, I again, I don't think so. Partially because there are, for instance, like I said, you're not necessarily going to get the same catalysts that you got for Bitcoin to get where it is. That is the part that I have my doubts. I agree again on this being a potential trade in the short term. I agree with what you said about potentially chasing if you had some conviction on this. I just wouldn't imagine that this is going to, I don't know, I see the likelihood of this following a BTC-like trajectory to be significantly lower than for most other assets out there. More easier to understand assets, ecosystem and stuff. Like, I don't know. It's again, the being as much into privacy as I am, I think that that is a liability here for that to happen.
As just a closing thought, one of the biggest concerns I have with the privacy narrative in general is that the only thing that's moved is Zcash. So in my mind, if the privacy narrative is real, and if the demand for privacy is real, you would see other privacy things moving as well.
I disagree. And the main reason why I disagree with that is because if we're talking about assets, there can be only one. And the only other thing, we have Zcash and Monero, basically. And anything beyond that is a platform. And platforms have a whole host of other concerns that we have been discussing in relatively recent calls.
I think you're overcomplicating it. I think like just as a broad trend, you would see some movement. So I'm sure we all know that Zcash, at least in the early days of the pump, was being very intentionally pumped. And that says something, right? Like, yes, there's some kind of hyperstition meaning like you can bring reality into being by enough people just repeating it. There's some kind of hyperstition in the like you bring about the privacy narrative with something like Zcash running, which is probably true. But again, if this was more like there's actual demand for privacy and less we speculate there will be in the future, then you would see other things happening, I think.
I don't know, man. I'm sure. Actually, that's a good question. Generally speaking, have we seen the last
someone would buy up Alio for the privacy narrative beta, and that doesn't happen.
Maybe, but on the last year, I think we have seen, and I haven't been tracking a lot of stuff in the last year the way that I was doing past year, so I might be off here. But in the last year, it seems we have seen, before we used to see what you mentioned, if there's a narrative, then a whole bunch of narrative-related things pump. In the last year, it seems to me that we have been seeing single tokens ride. We haven't seen like narrative groups. So if I haven't seen that in other space, I'm not sure why I would see in privacy.
And an argument is Zcash hasn't run yet, and if it runs, actually the beta trade begins later.
It's gone from 50 to 700. That's not running.
Yeah, but okay. So like,
the BTC market cap is 1.3 trillion. We're at 8 billion.
It's 10x, man.
That's possible. That it's just delayed. And I agree with Ricardo that I think the relative trade thing is like lessened. I do think it still exists. So like one clearest example, I think where it exists is like if you look at Solana tokens and Solana, like there's still a relative trade there. And I think that like it's less severe than it used to be. It's no longer like completely indiscretionary. But if you think that the privacy narrative is more than just a meme, and you think there's like actual sort of demand for the utility of privacy, then I think you do get you should see something, but it's possible that it's too early for that. I will concede that.
Yeah, and also Solana and Solana tokens a little bit more closely coupled because just some people are coming into the ecosystem. What I'm referring to is, say, seeing Solana run and having other fast chains like Aptos and Sui run, right? Which is a narrative when pulling up the space. That is the thing that I really don't think we have seen for over a year.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. Our predictions. Mika predicts that Zcash will become Bitcoin. Ricardo thinks it's going to zero, and I'm somewhere in between. Is that about right?
Yeah. And Ricardo thinks that there is a trade there, but I don't necessarily think it's going to become Bitcoin.
When this is financial advice, 20% of BTC. BTC is in a bull market. BTC should be in a bull market, but it has some like Saylor overhang. It gets to 20-30% of BTC, which is 30-40x from here.
And the Saylor overhang is
I don't know if I actually believe that. I just like, I think it's like a crazy prediction. And I think like it's possible that it actually happened. So I'm like if that trade, if that actually happened, like I deserve like a lot of credit for that.
Okay. So then the question here is, Mika, are you talking about a SEC USD trade or a SEC BTC trade?
SEC BTC trade, actually.
Okay, that I am a lot more likely to buy.
Dan was not talking. I thought he was just overwhelmed by the wisdom of providing.
I think you literally blew his mind, man.
The equipment doesn't work anymore.
You get a demo blue screen over there.
No, my AirPods run out of battery. Okay. Saylor, Mika, you put out the hypothesis that Saylor is the greatest existential risk to Bitcoin. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, Saylor is right now like 5% or something of the supply. And then I don't think like BTC, at least at the wrong moment, like at this moment, BTC couldn't absorb anything negative happening to him. Like that would be extremely counterproductive. There could be other regimes where it could absorb his weakness, but those weaknesses don't show up during those times either. He's just has the ability to double down. But I mean, the simple explanation and the kind of correct explanation of the financial instruments that he currently has is that he, for the first time, really has like an instrument which has funding costs. So previously he didn't really have like any, he essentially had like no funding cost or something close to it. And now he has like genuine funding costs in the kind of STRC instrument, which have to be paid some way. And they're basically, you can make this argument where he's selling low, like he creates the bottom by selling low to fund that instrument. And the market like kind of, and then he will be forced to buy back essentially the same BTC or the kind of whatever dollars one can scrape at a higher price. And that's what the market will do to him. And that seems to me like the kind of most likely outcome in a sense where he's actually like negative reflexivity for the market for the first time. So like, it's not existential. You can think of it like kind of as a 1.3x or something long in some sense, but you can think of it as like 1.3x with like real funding costs, which where do you cover them from? For him, he doesn't have anything valuable in his life, except the BTC. So there's nothing there to pay for that funding cost. So that's the kind of situation he's in, which means that during the bear market, might be selling BTC, and he already sold some, but like that was a bit weird as well. That I'll say that amounts and stuff. So it wasn't purely this scenario, but the kind of scenario he can find himself in very easily is that he's selling during the bear. not an insane amount of his position, just selling some. So it's like it's the 1.3 block thing, which means that maybe he's selling off like some few percent of his supply and then buying it back higher. The situation for him is still not like you're gonna die and be liquidated, but it is just like verse now.
So far he's bought it back lower. And also like I wonder, because he sold like 32 BTC, which obviously the market freaked out about. But I wonder if that was just like he was just like testing the waters, or like almost like pre-managing expectations, because that as an amount means nothing to strategy.
Yeah, I was going to point out that was more of a smoke test, I think, than anything else. The amount was what, like 5 minutes of interest or something. Frankly, the main issue with that was not the amount. I think the main issue with that was market-wise, is that it punctured the bullshit he had been saying for years of we're never going to sell, so your kids, or your kidneys, or your wife, right? You just don't touch your BTC. So anyone who now believes that like, oh yeah, he's never going to sell again, or he's just doing this because he's super genius and is going to buy it lower, has basically just drank the Kool-Aid. And I do agree, by the way, that he is an existential threat. There's way too much supply under their control, and they have consistently been the large, or at the very least, the largest individual buyer that we know of. So people, I think that people, and by people I mean not you or I mean funds, like people with massive amounts to deploy. They basically were before this operating, or they were able to operate, convince themselves that they were operating on the theory of the bigger fool, and the bigger fool was always going to be Saylor. And now you can no longer convince yourself of that.
But there is like, the narrative, the very simplistic narrative was punctured, but in the kind of like grand arc of time, like surely he can create a narrative around like their long-term BTC absolute holdings continue to go up. They sometimes sell, but like overall they grow in the long term, which is what he seems to be trying to go for. I'm just saying, like, it's not crazy that he convinces the market of that, right? You just need to demonstrate it over a few data points.
That's the thing. It's not crazy, but narratives have Lindy as well. And he just took the old narrative and threw it into the trash. Now he has to rebuild this one. And for properly rebuilding this one, he's going to likely need a bull, because otherwise everybody's gonna say like, oh nice, you sold it and you bought it like 2% lower. Big whoop.
And I think he is in a strong position otherwise to do well in terms of balance sheet growth and BTC denomination, except that the market really hated him selling 32 BTC. You know,
but then it's a good idea to do it in the bear, right? Like you would much rather.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so if we get another bull, I think that next bull vindicates him.
We shall see.
I'm not saying I hope that's gonna happen, or that I like think the whole strategy makes any sense in general, but
I think this is about the limit of aggressiveness that one can take with his strategy. I'll say that. Like I don't think this is too far, but I don't think you can go further from here. This is like the limit of
32 BTC is max.
No, they're just the limit of leverage. Like this is, you kind of go more than this is about the
yeah, but he's gonna try, obviously.
I just think the market would react so negatively to, like, if you look at like currently how the STRC is trading, it's not trading so well. So I don't think the market will even accept him going further than this anymore. Like,
You mean basically like they're not going to fund him?
yeah. Like this is the level. This is like
I mean,
this is the last financial instrument left. Yeah.
That's a good point. That like ultimately Strategy's ability to continue doing this is very sensitive to like, are they able to pull in 2.5 bill on a convertible note equivalent, or like a bond? And if the market is like, nah, then that caps him out. On the flip side, I think the market not paying him makes him a more likely seller. And so like the game theory is not that clear, right? Like let's imagine that there are many billionaires with a large incentive for BTC to remain the way it is. And them not funding Strategy would essentially lead to Strategy selling. Like
we're saying
listen. So Saylor is the white knight, that falls on his sword in a sense. But now Saylor is not the white knight anymore, right? Saylor completely controls the price of BTC if he wants to.
Okay, so
This
basically what you're saying
puts him in a position where any large holder of BTC has a big problem if Saylor's like, guys, we need to sell unless you give us money,
you're saying that Strategy is a Bitcoin price protection racket.
It's a systemic risk to the price of Bitcoin.
Coming out unless you fund me. Like
he doesn't need to say that, right? Like, but now the market has already seen what happens when he sells 32 BTC. And if he's like, we need to buy another billion. If we can't buy another billion, then we're going to need to sell a billion. Like, he can crush the market. So I'm not saying any of this is happening or anything. I'm just saying that the dynamics right now are like slightly flipped from he's not exit liquidity. He's actually kind of central to BTC remaining the way it is. And so anything that fucks with Strategy's ability to continue operating is a huge problem for everyone else in Bitcoin. And everyone else in Bitcoin now is a lot of very powerful, rich people. Which is probably why he looks so haggard all the time, like he's continuously in these conversations with people who are like, I don't know if we should assassinate you or fund you or
that's so perspective.
But anyway, I think Mika, you're right that like it's the fact that it's no longer clean is a problem for the rest of the market. And now it's just a question of kind of like, how does the relationship between Strategy and the rest of the market develop? Which direction does it go? And so really the only thing I was pointing out is that Saylor does hold a lot of cards in that renegotiation of the relationship.
You're correct. I haven't even thought of it in these terms. You're right.
And I generally agree. Now, if I were in the position of said large Bitcoin holders, probably what I would do would be keep in mind that if you're the first one getting to the door, you're not panicking. Not financial advice, people.
Not financial advice, Nick.
Man, where the hell did you put in the Dr. Pepper, Mika?
Yes, but then there's I agree with that. Like the safe strategy, if you're concerned, is to sell. I don't know if the liquidity is there for those holders to like actually be able to get out. Um, yeah, it's also possible that it's already such a large group that it's just like they can't coordinate.
And when did anybody have any perspective on this? I don't wonder how concentrated it is. I mean, if this is say 100 individuals or companies that hold a similar amount altogether to strategy, then it shouldn't be that difficult for the market to absorb some of that, right? The question is if one of the largest holders is seen headed towards the doors. That's when things start getting panicky usually.
I mean, the funniest thing would be if we just had a good old fashioned Bitcoin fork where strategies coins are slashed. Reset the
That
cap table, baby.
that would be funny.
Does anyone remember the Bitcoin Cash airdrop? Bitcoin Cash was, I think, about 40% of BTC at its highest. You could get 40% stack increase for a BTC at the best moment in time.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't
Yeah,
exactly an airdrop, but yeah, the fork.
I mean, I don't want this to happen, but my God, a Bitcoin fork war now the scale would be epic.
Yeah, like say, Bitcoin BS, like say, SB, Saylor's vision.
Like, yeah, you'd have something like that, but and then this time, like, the U.S. government would take sides.
That would be hilarious.
Which, by the way, is a great segue into our next topic, which is Iran, U.S.
Oh, Jesus. Yes. That thing's such a fucking comedy.
Do you want to contextualize, Ricardo? I'm sure maybe everyone has read it in the news, but I think it's just worth going over the.
I mean, I hope
happenings.
everybody has read in details, but I don't know. For instance, I recently found out, and I'm not going to say his name because I love this guy. He's a great friend. But I recently found out that a friend of mine who lives in Germany did not recognize the last name Himmler, for instance. So a lot of people may be missing history. So the US was spending what, about $2 billion per day attacking Iran. So they get dragged into this fucking completely nonsensical war because Israel said, well, we're going to attack without you, and you're going to have to repercussions. So you better help us save the day here. Then not too long after, what they were insisting Iran should do was unconditionally reopen the strait as a basis for negotiation. And the strait wouldn't have been closed in the first place if they hadn't attacked. So anyway, they fucked up the entire world economy. Prices and inflation go through the roof. And they just came up with a memorandum of understanding that among these 14 points has basically the US and its allies will pay Iran $300 billion of restitution. Iran will end up placing a toll on ships coming through the strait, which is not in the memorandum itself, but the memorandum does say that there will be no toll for 60 days, which implies that there is likely to be one after. Iran is going to end up with no sanctions, so that they can take their money and do with it whatever the hell they want. And on top of that, the US, after abdicating in this spectacular fashion, after every week declaring that they have already won the war, they go and try and sign this treaty in Versailles. But if that doesn't ring a bell, maybe just search Treaty of Versailles. This is not going to be the first one that comes up. I mean, this is such a clown show that it makes me believe not only the simulation theory, but that the writers for this season of the simulation are getting really fucking lazy. It's absolutely absurd.
So, to be clear, as far as I can tell, Iran ended up with everything they wanted.
And at all.
And the US agreed to spend like 300 bill on Iran. And so this is a full-on loss. Like,
Iran
this
ended up.
is them
Yeah, they got.
bending the knee. The U.S. is like, okay, you guys can control the Strait of Hormuz, whatever you want, just open it, and like, that's what happened.
If you ask an Iranian leader before the war that you have to sacrifice your life, but this is the outcome that your country gets, you have to like martyr me up, man. I agree.
And it's much as though they ended up with everything they wanted. They ended up with things they didn't have before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They have sanctions lifted. They have a path to a toll in the strait. They have shown up the world that they can just stand their ground. And so I assume somebody slightly more sensible than fucking Cheeto Man, which I assume is most of the world, is going to think twice before fucking with them. And they get 300 billion from US, and the US allies who are involved in this thing. This is like a free buffet. It's just crazy.
So, I think, I mean, ideally this never happened. Obviously, this was silly and dumb. I do think this is a very, very bad precedent for the West. Like this weakens NATO considerably. Like if this emboldens the Middle East considerably, it emboldens anyone who is kind of at odds with the US. Like if Iran can do it, then why not someone much bigger? So I think very, very bad. Like, and the way that it happened as well, like where it wasn't even a saving face agreement. It was like full on, just like bend over. The fact that Iran can do that to the US will greatly change how people view geopolitics going forward.
Yes.
And I don't like that because I am on the border with Russia.
No,
Not
this was
good.
definitely a bite the pillow and going in dry moment. It's completely nuts.
Sorry, I had not heard that one before. I unmuted myself to get my laugh on the podcast because it deserved.
This is this is probably one of those episodes that if we were monetized, which of course we are not, would get demonetized.
No, I mean, I agree in that perspective. Now, again, looking at it from the rational side, this should never have happened in the first place. That's why no single US government recently had made a mistake of buying Netanyahu's bullshit and attacking Iran, right? Only this fucking moron did it. And if it was going to happen, it could clearly have been done in a much better way than now, right? You wouldn't have even like shown as much weakness as like, oh yes, but just return things to the normal state before we start negotiating. I do agree with you that now I'm sure this is a NATO thing per se, for what it's worth. Particularly because the US has already been signaling a lot that NATO can't expect anything from them for all intents and purposes. So I'm not sure if
now
this
it's
changes
like
the Russia equation.
what? No. But now it's like it is not about expecting. People assume they at least had the ability, right? Like it's like it used to be that like the U.S. might not help just because they don't feel like it. Now it's like maybe it's of no help even if they decide to help. You know, it's a bit different. I
mean, that's perfectly possible.
This is like it's there's a continuous stream of these things, but I think like from a European perspective, this is just like another signal that like Europe really needs to get its shit together very, very quickly. It's we may not have the allies by the time something happens. The allies might not be capable of helping by the time something happens. There's like all these elements, and Europe is still like this like super backward, like, you know, we're just neutral in everything place. And the thing is, like, we border all this stuff, you know? What are you laughing about?
Take a group, man. I'm sorry. This was like that was me. I sent a message to Mika, and Mika started laughing, and then I started laughing at Mika. This is very unprofessional, but I group chat. I just I won't describe it to the listeners, but I was sorry. I'm so gonna have to edit all this. Or maybe we just include in the video with the background of who's laughing.
I'm like now full on chill Zcash and gone all in on rape jokes.
I mentioned this. I can't recall how long ago. It was not. It was an episode that wasn't too long ago. But I did mention that I did see a positive side of the way that the U.S. had been going to shit and how pusillanimous and self-interest they were acting, which was that this should made it evident for any semi-sensible European leader they could just rely on them, period. Not only that, but they may need to consider it as someone who works against their interests. And now they should have made it clear. Now there can't be any question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, ultimately in the long term, that can be a good thing. That, you know, maybe Europe needs to start, you know, trying to be kind of like a superpower again and focus less on putting people in jail for social media posts or whatever, taxing their assets. But I think in the short term, like, first of all, I have very little trust in the EU. Period. Like, it's, I think the transition period to this is like going to be quite difficult. There's just not, like, we don't have power structures in place that are like really, in my view at least, like set to handle anything besides abundance. And so I think it's going to be difficult, and it's going to be a bit slow. And I think this single outcome increases the likelihood that Russia tries to attack someone else by a lot.
Look, I generally agree with the theoretical possibility, but considering the way that even just Ukraine is keeping Russia at bay, I would be surprised if there isn't, at the very least, a certain amount of internal pressure on Putin to not do something even stupider. And I am not sure how capable they would be of overextending themselves into yet another front. Like,
I'm not
saying
this necessarily like near term, and I agree the Ukrainians are doing seemingly a very good job and probably coming up with the future of warfare while they're at it. But in terms of, like, you know, I'm not talking about timing. I'm talking about sort of like long-term geopolitics. I think this clear sort of deterioration of the U.S. ability to impose, you know, power beyond its borders will make it more likely that Russia does something. It makes it more likely for China to test Taiwan.
Yes, that absolutely.
All these things, like, you know now that the U.S. might bend pretty easily, kinda. Like, how long did this war take?
February 28th was when they attacked. So we're June 18. That's been less than 4 months.
In a few months, someone was able to completely turn it around. And that someone was Iran.
Iran.
I know, someone who, like, a country that no one would have expected to be able to. Like, I would have. Maybe I just don't know enough about Iran. Like, I'm ignorant, but like, I would have expected, like, very protracted conflict over many, many years, blah blah blah, sort of like Iraq, Afghanistan style, you know. probably
no,
very
no,
different
those-
in many ways, but still like the same kind of dynamics, and that just didn't happen. Like they
Yeah.
just mic dropped on the US in like a few months.
Yeah, like the difference with say Iraq, the Iraq war in Iran is that I don't think Iraq controlled any major global pathway, which was the thing that Iran used leverage very, very well. That is obviously yet another reason why the US should have been getting involved in this fucking clusterfuck. But now I agree with you regarding the European Union. Quite frankly, the single best thing that the EU, I think, can do in the Russia situation at the very least is show their support behind Ukraine to make sure that they have everything they need and then some to keep Putin as occupied as the EU as they can possibly can while the EU gets its general shit together. And that is not going to resolve the Taiwan-China situation.
I mean, at this point, I think the EU should just go and negotiate their own stuff with Iran. And like, why the fuck is the US doing negotiate? Like, you know, that doesn't seem to be working very well.
I mean, considering that what the US is doing is giving them a blank check, by all means, let them do whatever the fuck they want. You don't want to get involved into that mess.
Oh, but I think it was there, like other countries that were involved were a part of that 300 billion package.
Yes, the allies, if I from understand, was the allies who were involved in the attack. As far as I know, the EU was not, except for like few countries that like Italy was providing bases for refueling or something. But
anyway, this shit is completely fucked. If you like the trajectory right now does not seem to be a very positive one. If I was to guess, searches for safest place to live in World War III have probably skyrocketed in the last few years, etc. But whatever. Let's figure out some new tokens to invest in.
to Ponzi for the next one.
Yeah. We had something about Hyperliquid. What did we want to discuss about Hyperliquid?
I just let Mika take a victory lap, I think, because he was hyping Hyperliquid not too many episodes ago, and it has hit 3 all-time highs in the last 4 weeks. I think I will need to look at the dates of when we discussed this, but it's been easily 100% since Mika mentioned it.
Mika, why do you think it has like performed so well in an environment where most other things have not?
Most of the things have perhaps more natural selling. So there's always kind of, if you look at just the base of validators, investors, team, yada yada. When there's no buy side, that it can get like pretty ugly, even if even the sold amounts like feel kind of small and the market caps feel big. And they just have a much better flow story with the buybacks happening from the revenue, which is like very, very much non-trivial. It's a big buyback that's happening all the time. So it kind of works in the reverse. I think there's always this kind of thing of early cycle. Not that it's again like it's going to be so cyclical. I don't mean purely that, but I just mean like when things start to go okay and there's room for things to go okay, the fastest names, I think, like from early on, are the ones who tend to do very well for a longer term. And I think Hyperliquid already kind of from the bottom to like from like 20 to 35 or something, like it already did like a big jump. And here from like 35 to the 70s, it's like a much more noticeable jump, but it's like a continuation of what already had existed. There is some like risk here, I think, now in terms of the absolute size starts to get reasonably large. There's some caveats to that as well, but it's certainly true that it's like kind of reached the size of Sol, for example. This is again a bit of a measurement question on the token supply, but like conceptually, it's in that area of sizing, which is very rare. Only like ETH and BTC are really above it anymore. But so I don't know what happens from here. I would like, if you told me to be bullish on just like any of the top 10 names, I would choose that one for sure, or top 8 or something. Well, whatever kind of gets us into the multi 10 billion market cap area. I would still choose that because I just believe in the market dynamics working for them. But yeah, so that's answers something maybe.
Yeah, isn't another thing that their trading activity is like, I think quite a lot of it is real world assets.
Increasingly so, all the time. Like kind of the every day you check, it kind of gets better in terms of that. Like and they're able to.
Commodities were doing very well for a while.
Commodities were doing reasonably well, and I think what's the most positive signal is that, for example, when there's vol in oil, then oil does really well. When SpaceX launches, well, SpaceX does really well. So they do really, really well every single time they have an opportunity to convert like kind of real world activity into. So like the S&P, NASDAQ, like not bad volume, it's pretty good, but like it doesn't like stand out necessarily to you. But they always get this boost where they seem to find the next level kind of each time there is a new narrative that they can pull towards them that's like big enough.
Yeah. Well, I think they like benefit greatly from like the simplicity of the technical design in a way where like they can trade whatever, right? Like if you're trying to bring real assets onto blockchain, there's all kinds of like regulatory blockers and like, it's just slow and complicated. You need to deal with things in the normal legal world. They can just add assets. And so and the traditional financial market always has some narrative going. And so they can just always tap into that. And I think that's quite powerful. There's maybe a longer discussion to be had about like why Hyperliquid specifically, which we've kind of touched on before. And I think it's something we should like continue having, but maybe that's not for today. Ricardo, do you have any thoughts on like why Hyperliquid?
Not any that we haven't discussed before. Actually, the Mika has gone over the actual asset numbers more than myself, so nothing to add there. And I do think that there's something here at play that we're going to continue seeing on the pattern that we have discussed, that open platforms are better for experimentation, whereas narrowly defined verticals are better for extraction. And I suspect that's something that we're going to continue seeing more and more and more, particularly as the open platforms trip over themselves and then swallow their tongue, like that's happened with Drift and other major showcases on Solana. So, yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably it for today.
Sounds like a plan.
Hope everyone has learned many things,
including benefiting from our massive geopolitical experience.
Indeed. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.